As we head down the home stretch to the end of the season, let's bring on one of our favorites to talk some baseball, life, everything else. Doug Glamville, how you doing today, man?
I am great. I'm great. I'm well traveled. Feel good. Although I banned myself from red eyes because I was basically like melting each week. So I said, you know what, red eyes got to go. So that was good. And yeah, I'm feeling good. We're in the home stretch here in September, so a lot of exciting baseball.
You talk about exciting baseball. You saw what I think is one of the Phillies' best games of the season the other night in Milwaukee. You were there calling it. You don't think so, Jeff? Jeff
No,
shaking
I
his
don't think
head.
that was one of the best games.
It was one of their most resilient games that
Schwarber
they've
had
had.
4 home runs in a game last week.
Okay, that was a individual player effort. That was not a team effort. Although the whole team homered that night.
Yes.
Doug, talk about what you saw in Milwaukee the other night, and what could be a preview of something we'll see going forward.
I kind of thought this would be a great series and a great game. I mean, we talked to both managers before the game. First of all, Pat Murphy is a gem. Like talking to him in Milwaukee, he just thinks it through. But he has that old school kind of like, I know these things are important and these like work ethic, like kind of fundamentals. And I'm trying to synthesize that with the modern data that comes in about like this should be a good changeup, but the guy's hitting it, kind of thing, right? So he's a lot of fun, and I think their team is exciting. So when I looked at the Phillies and talked to Rob Thompson, Rob was sort of like, "All right, it's go time. It's go time. It's September. You got to, as he said, check your ego at the door. It's sort of like when they did We Are the World. They said, okay, I know you guys won Grammys, but you got to check your ego at the door. We have a bigger cause. So right now, that's where the Phillies are, and I think that game really embodied it. Right? They got behind and they just kind of kept coming. Harper, everybody like did little pieces to bring them back. Sosa. So I feel like that is it's a resilient team, and I think that game itself was sort of what they're shooting for. Yeah, they don't want to give up 8 runs, but they also know they can come back on anyone.
Well, you just mentioned checking your ego at the door, and
Yep.
it's that is a concern in Philadelphia right now. So we have a couple outfielders, not just one,
Yep.
who who do have to check their egos at the door. Max Kepler has expressed his displeasure about platooning, and now Nick Castellanos has expressed his displeasure and has kind of gotten in the face of Rob Thompson in the past
Mm.
when he's been taken out for defensive reasons. The fact that he's platooning now. How, as a player, do you check your ego at the door? And is it something that we really do need to be concerned about, or do these players in particular know what's at stake and are able to do it at least for the rest of this year?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's it's actually really hard, because all right, just take Philadelphia specifically. Philly loves the guys that have the confidence and the bravado. It sort of fits Philadelphia. So if you get that persona, then you're going to have someone who's going to fight to be in the ball game and believe in their ability to be the difference maker. So you want that, but you also have to figure out how to balance that. Well, there's a bigger goal here, and they haven't won the World Series with this core group of players, and they're trying to find a way to do that, and it requires the decision maker, in this case, the manager or front office, to say, I got to have all tools at my disposal to make the best decision, what I believe is the best decision for this moment, for this team. And that does not account for individual just, goals, right? It's much more about shifting. I think it's really hard. I started pretty much my whole career, and I got traded to from the Rangers to the Cubs in the hottest month of my career. And I was like, oh, of course I'm going to get traded and start because why would you trade for me? And then I barely platooned with Kenny Lofton. Lofton played against most righties, all righties and most lefties. And then I was the guy coming in against Al Leiter or whatever. So I wasn't happy, and I know that I had that game winning hit during the NLCS, and after the game, they asked me about it, and I was like, "Well, I've hit righties my whole life. I mean, this is not novel that I got to hit off a righty, like." And Dusty Baker like called me in the office after that interview. He's like, "I know you can hit righties. I know. I'm trying to balance all these guys." And so I was like, "Yeah, I wasn't happy, but I was able to check it enough to be like, I know we're trying to win here." But I had sat, I'd been sitting for 3 weeks, and I'm supposed to come off the bench and hit Braden Looper's sinker. So these are kind of behind the scenes. So it's really hard. I think it comes down to the leadership. And that includes the guys in the clubhouse, like Bryce Harper. I think the manager has to be aware of this going off the rails, understand it, and also figure out how to like turn it into something positive. A lot easier said than done. And if guys like if guys shoot themselves in the foot over this, teams they'll trade you. They'll just they'll be like, okay, we hear you. Good luck in 2026, because eventually it's unsustainable.
You talk about leadership when something happens on a team. Obviously, there's the human side of Zach Wheeler going down with the blood clot. Then there's the baseball side. You're someone who's been on teams where players have gone down. Talk about the impact on a team, both personally and professionally, when you lose someone that plays the way he does, but also has the character in the locker room as well.
Oh, and well, Jason Adam, right? San Diego Padres. I mean, these are when they become pillars to your locker room and your culture. Oh, it's devastating. It's like grieving, and players go through it. I mean, I think the thing that's sometimes understated is, a lot of these players you grew up with, you really grew up with, whether opponents, whether it's just minor leagues, and when you see a teammate get hurt, it's like a brother. You really can't do anything about it. And you see them go down. So you have to once again your leadership, your ability to kind of reset, absorb it and find a ways to turn it into something motivational has a lot to do with who's running your team. And I think that I've seen a lot of guys. I just remember my roommate was Brooks Kieschnick. He was a first rounder I think he was a couple years after me in Chicago. And we were up in the big leagues together. That's what we're gonna miss with the 40-man roster because he used to bring up all 40 guys, right? Now there's like cap and two guys or whatever. So the cool thing about when they called everybody up is like you kind of celebrated together as AAA players or whatever. You're like, yeah, we're all together, and you just had a peer group. So I remember one day we were playing at Wrigley, and I was in center, and Brooks was in left, and he went for a ball down the line. He ran into the wall and hit his knee on the wall, and he was kind of down. And I remember running over, thinking, he got up to get the ball or whatever it was. And I remember just like the devastation I felt, because it's like you didn't realize how close you are, and then you have those moments of like you don't want to see your brother hurt. You just don't. So it's a big deal, and but I think guys like Wheeler, who's currently like kind of staying out of the locker room, who come back and eventually just kind of you know, I think he'll be a motivational figure, once he decides to kind of get back into that mix. And that's where they can be great assets, even though they can't play.
How do you make that decision as a player? When your season is over, how do you make the decision of is it best for me and is it best for the team that I be there or that I not be there?
I say you have to talk to the players. They're in touch in some way or another, texting each other. I think you kind of touch, and I think there's guys like Philly is a good example. Kyle Schwarber, I'm sure he'll like have some communication, and then you could sort of decide. I know, like I was hurt in Texas early in the season, so I didn't have the sort of I'm out for the year thing, and I'll never forget Sean Dunston, a mentor, who was talking about he was upset that we had Kevin Tapani was one of our pitchers and he got hurt and he was out. And Dunston was really bothered by how Tapani didn't know whether he should be there. He was kind of like, so he stood up, he literally stood up on a table, which is this is vintage Sean, and just said, how these guys feel? Like they feel horrible. They're here, they don't know where to be. I had a back surgery before. We got to figure out how to like include that. He just wanted people to know that Kevin was feeling fearful about stepping on people's toes because he couldn't help on the field. And I got that. I finally had that experience in Texas, and I remember they said, "Okay, do all your workouts early because you can't get in the way of the guys who are playing. So you had to do all the training and get the trainers early, and then you had nothing to do, right? So you're sitting around." And I remember I was in like street clothes, and then they were like, "Put on your uniform. You have to be in uniform for 5 innings or whatever it was." And I remember I was I was in uniform, and then I changed, and then Rafael Palmeiro got up and he hit his whatever 400th home run, and we wanted to celebrate at home plate. So when he got up, I realized what was about to happen or could happen. So I changed. I put my uniform over my street clothes. I put on turf shoes, and then he hit the home run, and I came out, and I was literally in street clothes. It's like So, I mean, you just don't know what to do, and you just, but you have to communicate as a team so that you can still recognize you have value and you still have something to add. Maybe you're coach now, and they need you because you're still a key part of how they got there in the first place.
On the field, the acquisition of Johan Duran changed things overnight here in the pen. Talk about Duran, what he comes at players with, and how he's been able to put the other pieces more in place in that bullpen.
Man, that guy, 101 with like everything is hard and everything breaks in different directions. I mean, it's like plus plus pitches, everything. So I don't know. It's like Pedro Martinez, except harder. I mean, it's like crazy. So yeah, when you got a guy like that, that like kind of it's game over, it shortens the game. And then you get another guy like that, and it shortens the game. And all of a sudden, you have, sort of like the Yankees or the Padres. They just got a bunch of closers, and the game just gets shorter and shorter. I mean, they're not infallible, but yes, they mostly are get the job done. So Duran just sets that culture of like, he's just like almost a sure thing, but he's also a guy that lets everybody else sit in their roles, right? Like that's the thing that sometimes is like not really credited a lot. You get a guy that I am the ninth. Oh, great, I'm the eighth. I'm the seventh. Like you start to get into lanes, and you get it's so much easier to prepare. Like okay, I'm going to get ready for this, and I think the Yankees have that problem, and it's a good problem. Duvall, they got Bednar, they got Williams. I mean, 789, 789, 789. You have a bunch of closers. So Durant is like just gives you that stability and creates routines for others besides himself.
People have always been there are people that get critical of saying, well, you're a bullpen guy. You should just be able to pitch anywhere. Why is it so important for people that pitch out of the bullpen to have a role versus saying you should just be able to be plugged in anywhere?
To some degree, today's game, they probably are a lot more capable of pitching at any time. But it's also the manager has to really understand every pitcher and what they need to be into their routine. There's some guys that can get up and get down and get up and get down and then in a warm up and then they don't need them. And there's guys that need like once they're hot, you got to bring them in. I mean, and think about what happens. You get traded. Like, okay, Mason Miller goes to the Padres. Do the Padres know like what Mason needs? It takes time, and so it's not automatic that you just roll out guys because they're good and they just, the more you get awareness. Like Josh Hader wants to pitch a complete inning. Don't bring me in the middle of an inning, right? So all these guys have different routines. So that's one thing that makes it hard. And then the fact is, like anybody else, you just like the comfort of knowing what your role is. Most people prefer that in anything they do. They just have a better sense of like how to be prepared, just familiarity, what part of the game you're in. I played with Ugar Thurbina, and he used to be in like he was not even in street clothes. He was in long johns and like a robe until the sixth inning. He's like, I'm the closer, so that's it. I don't need to be ready. He's taking naps, and like he was
Those
pretty
long
good though.
johns in a robe.
I mean, yeah, he was out there, but so yeah, I think it's not. It's like me. I was a center fielder, and then I played left field, and I felt like I was standing on Mars. I think like I remember Derek Jeter one spring training. I was the Yankees in '05. Jeter, I was standing on the second base side, and I said, "Hey, Jeter, yeah, I said, come over." And he came over. He's like, "I got to go back. Like this feels so weird because I played shortstop, and the field feels reversed. Like, it just feels backwards to me. He literally felt like he was on another place. So that's the habitual nature of these players sometimes.
We've got the All Star game coming here in 2026. A few weeks ago, you were at Temple with Dave Dombrowski, Jimmy Rollins, a bunch of other people looking at youth sports and the legacy potential of the game. Talk to us first about the game being here from the spectacle side of the event itself, but then the lasting impact that that event can have on this community.
Yeah, I mean the All Star Game is really can help a community rally behind different causes, especially through the spirit of baseball, and that's a great thing for the game. You think back to some of the pioneers in baseball, whether Jackie Robinson or Roberto Clemente, and there's so many people. I get to vote sometimes on the Clemente Award, which is phenomenal, and you see the great work of these players in all these communities. Baseball can just put the thumb on the scale, help, support. Philadelphia has a huge issue in like especially the north side of the city. This sort of almost like desert, really, in terms of baseball fields in disarray, disrepair. The fact that you don't have youth having activities to be able to, have safe spaces to go and just learn the game. And it may not have to be the game; it could be a swimming pool. It could be, but the most important thing is that these kids have something to be able to rally behind, so that they're healthy and productive citizens and people. So MLB can really do a lot, and they have done a lot in any place that they've been in the All Star game. And Philadelphia, Claire Smith at Temple University is doing a lot to bring and shed light to, like, so that they have a specific ask when the game is there. Like, and they're not trying to do it selfishly in the ivory tower. She's really trying to bring people all through the community, coaches, little league, everybody, and say what do we need, and get a feel for the people who have to implement it, who've been doing the work. That's it's just great for any community, and the All Star Game brings all these stars to one place to really raise that awareness.
Can I talk about Doug, the author, for a minute, for more than a minute? This seems like a passion, uh, as much as baseball is. You seem to have taken, especially in your Substack pieces, there's a passion to your writing. How much are you enjoying the freedom of being able to do this through Substack?
It's a unbelievable enjoyment, and I anticipated that. I've been kind of the frustrated writer for a long time. I wrote a book a while ago. I had a rhythm and a column, and to your point about the bullpen, I like the rhythm of writing every week. I want it, and first of all, I'm sitting on unbelievable stories. Like just now, I just wrote down "check your ego at the door." That's a column, right? I mean, that's a column. It's like I'll do that all day long. But part of it is just like how I think, so it's just a natural expression of mine. And I think that's always healthier for me to be able to say, I have these ideas and this is the best way I can get it out. I think it's very therapeutic for me. When I lost my father many years ago in the last game of the season in '02, that was a big, humongous loss, but it was also a search for, like, how do I keep him present even though he's gone? And I've tried pictures and videos, but really what worked was writing because he loved poetry. And so there's another cause behind why I write, not just like, hey, I want to be breaking news, but I just want to, go deeper into things. At a time, it's hard to go deeper. Click, click, tweet, and everything's fast and furious. And there's also an element of, like, I have to be first. I can't, like, digest this and get information. So I just stuck to my process, and it's been really phenomenal. And I part two. I'm almost done with my Hall and Oates part two. I got, a bunch on tap, and I literally I have this the entire year mapped out. I mean, I have new ideas come all the time, but I could just keep going through the end of the year and not have run out of any ideas if I just stuck to what I planned out, 6 months ago. So I feel exhilarated by this opportunity.
Well, I just got to tell you with the Hall and Oates, I know Jason wants to ask a Hall and Oates question later on. I don't know if you remember, we had John Oates surprise you one time on the show, and we thought we were doing this big surprise, and it turned out you already knew him.
I was like, I know that voice.
It's the ultimate disappointment for
North
Jeff
Wales,
when he thinks he has a
Pennsylvania.
good one.
I thought I came
Yeah,
up with this great thing that this guy was going to call in and quiz you on questions, and you recognized the voice.
yeah, but he asked some tough questions, but I'm on top of it though. He couldn't get
he
me.
he did, but and Jason will get to that. But it, in July, you wrote an article on Substack on the strike zone. Can you tell people a little bit about the loss of the strike zone? So Jason sends me the context of this is Jason will often text me during a game that dreaded box when it's outside the box. Can you explain your discussion with Max Scherzer and how what we may lose as a result of automation?
Yeah, well, what's so amazing about it is, and this is why I love writing these baseball pieces, because it's really life, right? It's just life. Like,
Hmm.
we're all trying to navigate technology. We're trying to figure out. I have 4 kids. I'm like, okay, how much phone use, and all these things, and their school just said no more cell phones in school, right? So we're all dealing with this, and I know, like, what I appreciate about Scherzer. So we talked to Max Scherzer in spring training about the ABS system, the automated ball strike system, and we just wanted to get a sense of someone like Max with all that experience, who's seen all different iterations of this, and what he thought about it. Now, Max is Max, and he's going to come at you in a way you never thought of. So I appreciated that. but he was trying to hold on to the idea that although I have the persona that I'm going to get on these umpires because I do expect a high standard, I also appreciate the humanity that they bring, and that and I'm going to quote George Will: "When you try to make something perfect, you make it worse." Right. So, you have to find that balance of like, and I don't say human element like, oh, just accept like mediocrity, but the fact of like, you also want a rhythm of the game where if you're questioning every call and every pitch, and then you're always like tapping your head, it's like, okay, yeah, you want to get it right, but then you get it right to the point you don't have a game, right? That's the, like one day they're going to have instant replay that the Webb telescope is going to have a laser and it's going to come in and we're going to figure out that the guy's spike came off the base when he stole second by like 0.00001 milliliters and meters, and we're going to say, oh, he was out. He was out. Like the atoms between the spike and like, okay, you're gonna have that technology one day where you're gonna automate the base. But then like, what do you have if you're constantly all it becomes is a game of just like officiating, right? And so you got to have flow and rhythm and tempo. That's why you have the pitch clock. You got to have something to prioritize in light of the fact that you might have different information at certain times. You don't want to ignore it because the fans go, what do? They go on their phone and they're like, well, I can see he was safe. Hard to ignore that, right? So you have to have very judicious and smart rules to make sure that you kind of maintain the balance of both. And Scherzer was saying we should have a buffer zone, which means like give them a margin that it's not perfect, but then we can keep moving, keep the game going, because like it didn't hit the K zone line exactly. Maybe it brushed it. I mean, you don't want to spend time on that. You want the game to keep going. So I really appreciate his point on that. That he actually wanted the umpires to have a buffer zone and then focus on the real egregious calls.
Yeah, I don't mind the buffer zone, and I'm there. It's the egregious calls that
Yeah.
get me and that I would like to fix. I'm curious. I joke with Jeff the art of framing. How is this going to change what a catcher does? I don't like when it's like 2 inches outside the zone and they try to frame it back in. That annoys me.
Right.
But I do like, yeah, that it drives me nuts. They're bringing the glove like all the way across their body to try and get it in the zone. It's like, come on. But I do appreciate catchers who are able to take a pitch right on the edge and make it look like it's there. How is this going to change the role of the catcher?
Well, it's up to the teams. I imagine pitchers like a target, and it does matter to pitchers as well that they have the ability to catch and present. I think that's also for the pitchers. But I realize that if you don't need if the zone is automated completely and it can call a curveball that scraped the bottom of the zone as it was going down, even though the catcher caught it low, you probably don't need framers. You don't really need it, and you could focus on hitting, let's say, or something else. So that's the question that a lot of people ask about whether, when you have the technology, do you therefore not need to present anything, and you just worry about getting more offensive-minded catchers. Yeah, you still have to throw and catch the ball, but you don't have to worry about presentation. They're all getting so good at it anyway. I'm not sure they'll abandon it, but it just becomes less of a necessary skill.
It's just that to me, baseball is art. And it
Oh yeah.
seems like and I do believe in progress, but I believe that some of this is taking the art out of the game, which is what makes it unique from other sports.
Well, and it's funny because generations have different perception of art, right? And I know I look back, and I'm sure if you go back to the '60s or or the Renaissance or the Harlem Renaissance, or you have different concept of it. But I know for me, there was an artistry of watching Ozzie Smith get out of the way of a double play when I was trying to take him out, right? I tried to take him out once, and I ended up in center field, and he was standing chilling by the mound because I thought he was going that way, and he went the other way. I mean, he would jump over you. So, I miss that. I think that's a lost art, but I also understand that you don't want to, people get hurt. And but presenting and catching and the beauty of baseball is just one of many examples of how this game has that poetry, which is why I've never run out of content to write about it because, but you talk to Dan Wilson of the Mariners, you talk to, all these catch Scott Service, you talk to Stephen Vogt, and you ask him about, can you block the ball when you're on one knee? And they feel like it's harder, even though the data may say otherwise. But he says like, I feel like it's just harder to move laterally. So we also recognize that in art there's trade offs, and that's where the leadership of the game has to decide. in conjunction with talking to these communities about what's important.
We talked earlier about, what you do when you lose a player for a season, a teammate for a season. On a more serious note, you wrote an article recently about losing a teammate and as we age, and you talked specifically about Ryan Sandberg. Can you talk a little bit about Ryan Sandberg and how it does become harder for teammates as you get older?
Well, I mean, it gets hard because I remember when Mariano Rivera retired, one of my colleagues at ESPN said, "My childhood just ended." You know, so there's an element of the loss is so layered because these teammates, and Ryan Sandberg's case was so much more than a teammate, right? He became a friend. I got to know his wife, his kids. I got to know him as like the icon behind the scenes, and then I got to lose him, and there's a privilege in that and a devastation in that, as someone that I admired growing up. So now you're losing heroes, and I think that that layered type of grieving is really hard to wrap your mind around because you just have so many different feelings about it, and they all end up in the L column. And so I spent time writing to just recapture what was in the W column, right? All the things that I was fortunate to experience with Ryan Sandberg. For me, he was the example of quiet strength, and I needed that because I was low key and I was labeled as nonchalant and lazy and all these things that kind of came my way because I didn't break helmets and I just played, tried to play hard. And Sandberg got the same issue in the minors, and he broke a helmet one time to appease, a coach saying you need to show emotion. And then and vintage Ryan Sandberg, he says, "Now great, I don't have a helmet anymore. And what did I accomplish? I just proved I can break a helmet, right?" So he just like it wasn't his thing. But when you learn around a baseball team, you realize all the value that everybody brings and their different personalities. I mean, you need Schwarber to be like, okay, cut the nonsense. You need Harper. You need Castellanos. You need people to challenge authority. You need people. You need all of that because they're going to carry the team at different times with their style. And as long as you have the respect of all the diversity, then you're able to kind of really pull in the same direction. Sandberg gave me that, because he came down on a rehab assignment once when I was in the minors and probably didn't speak for 3 days, but I watched him work and I watched him. I'm like, this is the best player in baseball right now, and he didn't say anything. So so now I can do my thing. I can do my thing now. All right, I'm okay. I can still be a great player and not necessarily scream at people. And I think that was one of the big takeaways from Rhino.
I have two left. I'm going to close on Hall and Oates, but I have to ask you because Jeff and I have disagreed. Commissioners talked about expansion and realignment. As a traditionalist, Jeff is in denial of some of the realignment ideas. Where do you think we end up with new teams and who they'll be playing in a few seasons?
I don't know. I think they're throwing anything out there. I get the geographic questions, right? If you just got rid of the NL which like gives me like heart palpitations because
Jeff, too.
that's a tradition. But I know their lines they're kind of disappearing. DH in both leagues. Pitchers aren't hitting. It's like I don't know what these leagues are anymore, other than a playoff format at this point and tradition, right? So I think that has value, but it's more and more with the speed by which everything changes with technology and awareness. It's hard to deny that there's some issues. So yeah, if you had Philadelphia, Boston, New England, yeah, okay, then everybody's in that one division. Your travel's nice. You have a lot of local rivalries. That could be fun. And I never thought I'd get used to the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League, and now I just can't even think of any of Houston Astros.
Or the Astros in the
uh,
American League.
I was like, what? Phillies beat the Astros to go to the World Series. And now it's like, you know, yeah. So I know I missed the element of surprise, like just like the All Star game. It's like you never saw each other, and then boom, you just dump colors on a palette onto a canvas, and then the World Series was like two unknowns. I really love that, but I don't think we're going back to that.
I don't either, and it hurts Jeff. I can see it hurts you too. I do think we're going to end up with some type of geographic thing, and it's going to drive baseball traditionalists absolutely
Yeah, it's
crazy.
yeah, it's gonna be north, south, east, west.
Yeah, I think it's going to drive all of the old school people who love the game and love the tradition out of their mind. And I'm kind
Yeah,
of in the middle. Like
yeah.
I understand why you would do it, but I do love some of those traditions that are getting lost as you make the changes. I have to close on Hall and Oates. We know your love for them. Like we said with your Substack, if people aren't subscribed, they're missing out. I mean, the thought that you put into the things you're writing, and right now you've started a series on how Hall and Oates have shaped your identity, helped you challenge assumptions about race and culture, and being part of your actual life. Uh, Talk about how meeting them was a childhood promise kept, and the depth that they've been able to influence you that you're now able to write about.
No, I appreciate that, and of course, I don't want to turn this into a 2-hour show because I could go on Hall and Oates. Yeah, it's kind of magical, and I feel like I've lived this charmed life. I'm very grateful. My parents and the opportunity to just my brother teaching me the game, and my wife and my children. I pinch myself a lot, and Hall and Oates was definitely they were definitely part of that. I grew up, in Teaneck, New Jersey, very diverse community that was, voluntarily desegregated. I mean, and voluntarily really integrated in terms of their school systems. And beautiful town. It had its challenges later, but when I first heard "Kiss on My List," 80s song, number one hit, I didn't have cable, so I didn't know MTV. I mean, I knew of it, but I didn't have cable in my house. But I would go to friends' house and see music videos, and they had this show called Friday Night Videos or Solid Gold or something. And I finally put the faces with the song, and I was like, I didn't realize that they were white, right? Because I heard, it's like when I first heard Madonna or like there's bands and that, it goes a lot of directions, right? White, black, and all these assumptions we have. And as an 11-year-old, or really probably 10, I I had to kind of think about that. And I know at a time in the 80s when you're trying to navigate identity and breakdancing is happening and the Beastie Boys are rapping and you're trying to figure all this out. These these crossover cultures were I thought was a good thing in certain ways because I was in a community that was celebrating our diversity. And so I dug into like, no, I just love this music. And I think I had to explain it more than I expected because I was this black kid that liked the white duo that sung, kind of R&B, and it's sort of like, and I kind of doubled down and tripled down and felt like, no, I just love this music, and music should transcend these constructs, even though they're constructs that I recognize have serious societal implications and they're real. It's just that as people embracing music and art and baseball, it should know no boundaries, right? That's why art elevates us beyond the things that we create for our own power and own interests and own whatever self-centered agendas. And so I wanted to lean into that, and I did. And Hall and Oates just became, my muses, my storytelling and every album. And I bought everything, and I went back in time, and I learned their '70s music, and I just dove in, and I saw them all over the country. And then one day, sixth grade, I'm in sixth grade, and my sixth grade teacher is married to the editor of Guitar Magazine for the practicing musician. And T-Bone Wolk, their bass player, wrote columns for them, beautiful writer as well. And he wrote, it's good stuff. And so I didn't read a ton of that. I was not so much into guitar, but I remember like Hall and Oates were their band was involved somehow. So I go over to their house in seventh grade with a bunch of friends, and I just got this picture, by the way. It's crazy, with all a seventh grade picture. And the husband here, asked us our favorite group, and I say Hall and Oates. He's like, I know them. He's like, well, what's your goal in life? What's your dream? I said to play Major League Baseball. And then he took the center photo out, which was Hart, Nancy Wilson, and signs on it. If you make it to the major leagues, I will introduce you to Darrell Hall and John Oates. And of course, I took that like a pact in blood, and so I did. And so 15 years later, and when I got called up, they weren't touring, so I couldn't find them. But then in '98, '97, they released an album, and I was in the big leagues with the Phillies by then. I got traded, and I said, John, here we go. And so he got me passes backstage to Radio City Music Hall, and I got to meet them. And I think that, it was like everything, of course, but I brought all my Phillies gear and gave them, autographed jerseys. But it's been cool to see like behind the scenes, but also just understand that they were people that really embodied kind of what I hoped they would embody. I know they're not together and there's all these things, but the respect for Philly soul, the respect for the diversity of their musical influences, the way that they had always crossed over genres. I just that's sort of my life story growing up in New Jersey, and in a town that did the same thing. And I used to I used to make little Pandora mixtapes for people in school. Say, because I believed there's a Hall and Oates song for everybody. So I'd have them make mixtapes of their songs, and it would expose me to their music. I heard Jimi Hendrix and Peter Frampton and whoever, and I'd just take their music and I'd listen to Hall and Oates, all their music, and I'd go back and make a tape and give it back. And I would say, okay, here's my Hall and Oates, here's my catalog for you. And I love when people would come back like, yeah, that was a good track. Like I didn't know in '77 they made this song "Don't Change" or whatever. So I just I just took it as like I was a kind of a disciple, I guess. And so years later, I I I kind of had this friendship with John Oates, and it just kept going. And now, like I post on Substack, he always emails, "I love that last one, man." Like I got to see him for coffee, and I'll give a little bit of how I'm probably going to close this three part, but one of it is around you know when you become friends with somebody genuinely, the selfishness washes away about I want them to make more music together. In the end, now I just want what's best for John Oates and the people. What's best for their life and their family. I just don't because I had the music. It isn't about me, even as a big fan. I become friends with them to the point where I just want them to be happy and successful in their lives. And if it means they're separate, then they're separate. So that's a cool place to get to with someone that you admired in very different contexts. And through these stories, I tell a lot of stories about baseball and just how it paralleled this musical journey with Hall and Oates.
Well, that's an awesome teaser for reading parts 2 and 3 that are coming up on your Substack, and look forward to you calling the games as we head into the postseason and getting you back on to break it all down. Thanks for always giving us some time, man.
Absolutely, it's such an honor to be on. Thanks for having me.